Solidarité FIC. La solidarité n'est pas de frontières. Et je veux dire merci. Je veux dire merci à la présidente Régine Laurent pour m'inviter. Et je veux dire merci à les membres au comité exécutif et les délégués au congrès. C'est un congrès formidable. Et si je continue en français, je vais me mettre dans beaucoup de troubles. Alors, and now I will speak English, and you'll have to bear with me on your translating machines. And I know that you're very familiar with these, much more than I am, and so I'll do my best to convey my remarks so that you can understand them. But brothers and sisters, I'm so happy to be here with you today at your FIC Congress. In particular because my mother was a nurse for her entire career, starting out as an LPN and then becoming an RN, working in the acute care hospital, and then moving into public health care. And me, myself, working with the Federation of Nurses and Healthcare Professionals for 15 years, bargaining contracts and mobilizing and working in the electoral area. I'm very pleased to be with you all here today, and I've heard some wonderful stories about your union and your struggle, and I understand that you are a union that is very militant and very strong. So, the attacks on working people do not stop at the borders. And indeed, there are no borders on right-wing ideas and plans to crush the middle class and the union movement. And in Wisconsin, we have received support from around the world, support of solidarity for our struggle. And I would like to say thank you to Canada, because it was Canada who was among the first supporters of our struggle around the world. Canada was there for us, both by sending delegations to Wisconsin, by sending financial support, and also by sending many, many letters of solidarity and support. And we know, and we're not happy about this, but we understand that the U.S. is a leading exporter in right-wing ideas across the border. Ideas that create privatization. And in healthcare, you know this very well. In the U.S., just about our entire healthcare system has already been privatized. And now they want to move on to privatizing our Medicare. And Congressman Paul Ryan, who many of you may have heard about, is the leader in Congress, and he's a Wisconsin congressman, and he wants to privatize Medicare, which would devastate the ability for the elderly to have quality health care services. And so we are fighting him each and every day. These right-wing schemes that are present in the U.S., and we are seeing a new wave here, indeed have the chance to leapfrog into Canada, and I understand that is why we need to work together. Because what is happening with privatization is it is simply a ability to pay back those politicians, pay back the corporations that have funded the politicians, because these politicians Republican politicians have been bought by the corporations. And I understand that in Canada there's a new proposal to defund the public financing of elections. Is that true? Which further would destroy the ability to have fairness in our elections and move more towards a system in the U.S. where it increasingly is dependent on money to get elected into office. And so, as the architects of these privatizing schemes and the right-wing agenda, meet. They are meeting. They are meeting across the borders. And we know that Harper is meeting with the likes of Scott Walker and the right-wing politicians all across the U.S. We understand that these guys are meeting in boardrooms and on golf courses. And that is why we, in the labor movement, also must be meeting across borders. Because we have the opportunity to learn from each other. And we have a lot to learn from you, Quebec. We have a lot to learn from you, Canada. And we have a lot to learn from LAFIC. And so our fight is your fight. And our fight is to maintain the middle class. Our fight is to secure a union movement that protects us from the greed that is so ever present. The Republican takeover of 2010, and many of you have likely watched how the Republicans took over in the U.S. state houses throughout the country. In Wisconsin, we had what we like to call a trifecta, which means we lost the governor's office, we lost the Senate, and we lost the Assembly, and we lost them all big. And so it went from completely Democratic-controlled, all the branches of government to complete Republican control. And this not only happened in Wisconsin, but all across the United States. In fact, the Republicans controlled more now, as much now, as they did in, I think, 1926 or 1928. So it really was quite an incredible takeover. And so they believed that now was their chance to implement their agenda that they had been planning for many, many years, 20 or 30 years. You've heard Karl Rove, one of the Republican strategists in the U.S., who talks about we need to shrink government to the place where we can actually drown it in the bathtub, right? Well, that is what they wanted to do. They've already decimated so much of our health care, privatized the health care. Now they are moving to complete privatization of our education system and our public support system. And so how they want to do this is by dividing us, by dividing the public sector workers with the private sector workers, so that they can destroy the public sector services and cripple public services and starve public education. And also, this is really critical because this also would destroying the union movement and crushing the workers' ability to have a voice in the job not only affects the worker, but affects the services that we provide. And as nurses and healthcare workers, I know that you can understand how important that is. Because if patients do not have advocates at the bedside, if patients do not have that ability to have a nurse, to have an LPN, to have a respiratory therapist, be able to stand up and say, there are problems in this hospital, then they don't have a fighting chance. Nurses and healthcare workers are the voice for patients, and they can only be true advocates for their patients if they have a union, if they have the right and the protection to stand up and speak out about abuses in the system. And so that is why we believe that unions are so important, and that is why they believe, on the other side, why they want to crush our union movement. And for a long time, there's been a debate about, all of a sudden, I don't know if you've heard this, but in Wisconsin, they started talking about the public sector workers as the haves of our society, as if public sector workers, nurses and firefighters and teachers are the elite in our society. And so they began to pit public sector workers against the taxpayers. And the taxpayers would then have to choose between saying, well, you know what, I have to pay so many taxes, I don't think I really can afford a quality education. And they set up this dynamic, this framework, which pits working people against working people. Instead of the frame that we ought to be saying is that there is enough money in the system, it's just controlled by the very wealthy. And it's time for real shared sacrifice. It is time for the wealthy in our society and for the greedy corporate CEOs to pay some back and share with the rest of us. And so 118 days ago, Governor Scott Walker declared war on the union movement. 118 days ago, Scott Walker declared war on the middle class. He declared war on the workers, and he declared war on our democracy. And we said no. We said no. We said no governor, not any governor, has the right to take away our unions. No politician has the right to unilaterally dissolve our collective bargaining processes. No governor, not a governor in Michigan, not the governor of Indiana, not the governor of Florida, not the governor of New Jersey, not the governor of Ohio. No governor, no politician has the right to take away our unions. Because the right to a union is a human right. The right to a union is an ethical right, and it's a moral right, and it cannot be taken away by any politician. And so, brothers and sisters, this is the last stand for the middle class. This is the last stand for a fair economy that works for us all. And this is the last stand for justice and democracy in our society. And brothers and sisters, Scott Walker didn't know what he started. He didn't know what he started when he declared war on the union movement. Because Scott Walker has gone too far. The spirit of the working people stood up and said no. People said no, we are sick of the corporate greed. We are sick of politicians being bought and sold, and we are going to fight back. And so we saw early on, remember I talked about the dividing of the public sector with the private sector, but that didn't happen. The private sector stood strong with the public sector and said when there is an injury to one, there is injury to us all. We will stand together, we will fight, and we will not stop until we secure our union rights and our middle class. Also, you may have seen that Scott Walker thought he was very clever, and he thought he was being very, I don't know, but he carved out the police and the fire from the union busting tactics. But we are happy to report that the police and the fire stood with the public sector each and every day, were with us at the protests day after day after day, and we did not break, and they stood with us in solidarity. Scott Walker had no idea what he had started. He did not understand the kind of mobilization in small towns and large towns and in Madison all across the country. And indeed, he did not understand that within days, cities across the U.S. would be holding solidarity rallies in support of the workers of Wisconsin. He did not understand the depth and the level of understanding of the Canadian labor movements, of our struggle and the importance of winning the struggle in Wisconsin. He did not understand that we would occupy the Capitol for more than 3 weeks. And this was and I know that there were many people from Canada who also joined us here, so I'm sure that you've had some firsthand stories, but it really was quite incredible to be there in the Capitol with the energy of so many people coming together, not only union members, but non-union families, farmers and students, and people who just said, you know what, enough is enough. We want our democracy back. And so, you know, they talked about the Capitol being wrecked or dirtied or whatever. But I want to just share a couple of stories with you. And that every night at 9 o'clock when the drum circles stopped, the students and union members would have a cleaning brigade. And they would take out the mops and the buckets and get down on their hands and knees and scrub the Capitol floors. And so we were very protective of our house, because that is our house, and it symbolizes our democracy. For me personally, I have a 11-year-old and an 8-year-old, and they wanted to sleep at the Capitol too. So my husband, who's a AFT member, we went on over to the Capitol with our sleeping bags and our pillows and our teddy bears and slept overnight in the Capitol. But as we were getting ready, my son Spencer, who's 8 years old, and he said that he wanted to just kind of look around. I said, well, go ahead. Now you realize there are thousands of people here in the Capitol at this time, and it's a quite confusing Capitol. So, I was busy talking and chatting away when my husband said, Spencer's missing. I said, oh, you'll find him. Just go and take a look, right? And he came back about 5 minutes later, and he said, I can't find him. I'm frantic. I said, okay. So I simply walked down the hall, and there were groups of young people sitting in clusters, organizing and working. And I said, hey, who here thinks like an 8-year-old? And they all said, I do. And so they rounded them up and immediately dispatched about 25 people down the stairs into the Capitol looking for Spencer. And at the same time as I was running down, people in the bottom had already found him and were sending people up to look for Spencer's mother. And so it was an amazing confluence. And so by the time I got down there, the drum circle had stopped, the first time the drum circle had stopped before 9 p.m. in, I think, 10 days. And, we were reunited. And then the drum circle began to play these songs about Spencer. And so this chants about Spencer went on for about 10 minutes. Spencer. So it was a great reunion, but it really showed that there was such a feeling of solidarity and friendliness and support within the Capitol of perfect strangers, which was really completely incredible. And Spencer will not forget that day for the rest of his life. So, but the occupation of the Capitol took place because when this union busting bill was going through, people were lined up to testify. And it's the same here. People fill out slips, right? You fill out a slip and you want to, give your testimony before the committee. Well, there were more than 3,000 people who signed slips to speak to the committee. But the committee decided that they had had about enough of the democracy. The Republicans decided they had enough, and they closed down debate with thousands of people still waiting in line to testify. And that is the first time that has ever happened in Wisconsin's history. And so that is why the senators, you've heard of our fabulous 14 senators, decided that rather than participate in this immoral bill, which would destroy our democracies and destroy the working people's ability to have a voice in the job, they decided that they would put a line in the sand, and they left the state. And so those fabulous 14 senators stayed out in Illinois for 4 weeks. And they did this because they had to go to Illinois because if they would have stayed in Wisconsin, the state troopers would have been sent out to grab them and force them back to take the vote. So this has created an amazing change in our future, I believe, because this was not just about the union movement. This was about people understanding the importance of unions in the economy, understanding that without a strong union movement, there is no fairness in our economy, there is no balance. And they said, hey, even if I'm not a union member, I certainly want there to be the ability for people to have a strong union. And that's why they came out. And so Scott Walker didn't understand that non-union people would turn out. They didn't understand that the farmers would come to support us. He didn't understand that the cops and firefighters would support us. He did not understand the depth of people's anger about the corporate greed and the undemocratic actions that he and his fellow Republicans were taking in our state. And Scott Walker just didn't understand that we would have 10,000 people rallying on the first day, and 50,000 people on the 5th day, and 150,000 people on the 21st day. And he certainly did not understand that we would be meeting here today in solidarity. And so, what do we do from here? Well, those senators who voted with Scott Walker to pass, they then passed that bill in the dead of night when our senators, the fabulous 14, were in Illinois. They decided to ram this bill through anyway, in the dead of night, with the doors to the Capitol locked shut. And brothers and sisters, that was illegal. And so we went to court, and the judge ruled in our favor, not once, not twice, but 3 times the judge ruled in our favor and said, Scott Walker, you need to hold that bill. You need to stop implementation of that bill because you broke the law. So there's all kinds of twists and turns in this saga, and we'll have some time after my remarks to go into more of the details if you like. But that bill was at the Circuit Court. The Republicans then appealed it to the Supreme Court. In between then, we had an election for the Supreme Court, and in Wisconsin, we elect our Supreme Court justices. And so that election took place. And the guy, Prosser, who was the Republican on the Supreme Court and had been there for a decade, was a sure winner in January. I mean, he won his last election by 95%. But people were so angered about what these Republicans had done with their union-busting bill that people around the state organized and took this very little-known candidate, Joanne Kloppenburg, and rose her up to the point where she actually won the election on the first day by only 200 votes. But very closely after that, some more votes were found in a Republican county, and the woman that was Kathy Nicholas, who was in charge of that county, was actually the staff person for the Supreme Court Justice Prosser 10 years earlier. So there's some coincidences that are going on with that. So at the end of the day, we had a recount of the entire of the Supreme Court election, but we did not prevail. So that bill has now gone to the Supreme Court. They heard debate about that bill on Monday, and we should be getting the results back on that any day. But even if we fail on that one, we have other strategies in the making and several other lawsuits challenging the constitutionality of the overall bill. In addition, we have filed, and we have successfully filed, recall petitions for 6 of the Republican senators that stood with Scott Walker and participated in the illegal bill passage on that night, in the dead of night. And so we have collected more than 150,000 signatures, and 6 of those Republican senators will be up for election this summer. And we're very pleased about this. This is historic. This many people being recalled is not typical in Wisconsin. And in fact, since 1926, only 4 politicians in Wisconsin have been recalled in all of that time. And so this really describes the depth of people's anger, the depth of their disillusionment from their government. And this is truly, truly historic. And but you know, there's also trouble here a little bit, because the Republicans have attempted to recall 3 of our Democratic senators, and they will stop at nothing. They will use dirty trickery. They will use deceit. They will use whatever they can to win. And so on their side, they have done some things that are still holding up with the Government Accountability Board. Because when they got their signatures, they used paid canvassers to come in and get those signatures collected. And in our review of those signatures, we found that they had put people who were already dead as signatures on the petitions. We have evidence and video of their petition signers going into bars and paying, saying that they would buy drinks for people who would sign the petition. We have evidence of people fraudulently making up names and people that don't exist at all on these petitions. So you see, brothers and sisters, they will stop at nothing to make sure that they can ram through their agenda. But we are fighting them at the GAB, and we're fighting them in court on this. And this just, another part of this just reared up in the last few days. So we want to have these recalls done as soon as possible, because the wind is at our backs. We are winning. The spirit of Wisconsin is with us. And so we want to do these recall elections very quickly. The Republicans want to delay, delay, delay. And so what they have done in an astounding strike of lowball politics is that they have decided that they would recruit fake, dummy Democrats who are actually Republicans to run against our candidates in the primary. So you see that the election is supposed to be July 12th, and that would be it. If there's a primary on the Democratic side, that general election would be pushed off. And so generally, this is unethical. It's unethical, it's immoral, because the party should be able to have its own candidates, correct? But they've just decided that they're going to meddle into the Democratic Party infrastructure and insert their own candidates. That, brothers and sisters, is wrong. And we believe that that is going to backfire on them. And so, as all of this is happening, the recalls and the court cases, the Republicans are also busy trying to ram through their agenda in the budget. And they are doing this with lightning speed, and they are passing through bills that will destroy our democracy and the underpinnings of our society. They have passed a voter ID law, which will make it more difficult for students and the elderly to vote, typically voters who vote Democratic. They are pushing through vouchers, which essentially destroy our public education by handing out vouchers to go to private schools with little accountability. They have changed the child labor standards in Wisconsin. On Friday, they put that into the budget bill. Even child labor standards, they are coming after. And so, while they raise taxes on the poor, they are cutting taxes for corporations. And so, as they're getting ready with this budget, we have staged what we are calling Walkerville. And I know you guys are all very familiar with this, because this is our tent city that we have set up at the Capitol. And I understand that FEEC did this about a year ago, am I right? You guys were at Tent City, I heard all about it. So, members of FEEC, I know you're so good at it, I'm inviting you to come on down and set up a tent with us at Walkerville. So it's been great. I've been there with my boy, with my son Nicholas, and the tents are surrounding the Capitol, and it's a very good site. Every night there's last night there was actually nurse night, and the nurses put the old, caps on and had the boxing gloves, and we're fighting, some of the Republican senators that were there, and so that was just terrific. But a lot of creativity, a lot of theater, much like the wonderful work that you do here today, which was so instructive and creative. But this movement really is our responsibility to do everything we possibly can to win this fight. And we believe that we already are winning because the hearts and minds of people in Wisconsin and the U.S. and indeed all across the world are changing to say that yes, we can make a difference. We can make a difference if we get out in the street in March, if we show our anger and we understand who is to blame. And so we have to do this because our kids' future is at stake. Our grandchildren's future is at stake. And so we will continue to fight, brothers and sisters. We will recall those 6 senators. We will continue to march. We will continue to organize, because this is our opportunity to rebuild our labor movement. Just like they rebuilt the labor movement in the U.S. in the 1930s, it is up to us to rebuild our beleaguered labor movement now. And so when we're all done with that, in January, we will also recall Scott Walker. His days are coming up, because we need to restore democracy, and we need to restore a fair economy that works for us all, and not just the wealthy few in our society. And I believe that together, brothers and sisters, together we can do this, because this is our opportunity, and this is the movement of our time that we have never seen before in our generation. This is the last stand for the middle class, and I pledge to you that together we will not stop, we will not rest, we will organize, we will fight until we win. Thank you, in solidarity.